Hey everybody, Nick here. I just got back from Cine Gear 2024 in sunny Los Angeles, California. It was absolutely amazing. I've been to a bunch of different expos before, but never to Cine Gear, and the vibe there is just something a little bit different from other expos, especially ones, like in Las Vegas. There's kind of a certain routine and a vibe there. Everybody's, rolling their wheelies through casino floors, waving smoke out of their faces. And then you get into these vast halls, which are just these massive spaces, but still enclosed and no sunlight anywhere, where Cine Gear is this other experience altogether. It's held on the backlot of the Warner Brothers Studios property. So it's just this beautiful space, right? You're in Los Angeles, there's palm trees everywhere, the weather's great, it's beautiful. And not only that, but you are physically at the location where big budget movies are taking place and being filmed. And there are active sets there all the time. So sometimes you have to take a different route around something because something is actively being used. At the beginning of the Warner Brothers Studios logo, whenever you watch a movie, the opening of that animated logo is an aerial shot of those very studios. You see that shot, and then sort of the outline ring of the WB shield wipes over it and then animates back into the rest of the logo. But to be there on that lot is just a really cool experience. And then throwing on top of that the huge density of people who are all invested in this pursuit, this craft of filmmaking, is just really cool. And everybody's super friendly and all smiles and happy. And part of that is that everyone is there to sell themselves or their services or their products. But the vibe is still just really cool. I really enjoyed it. I've been to a lot of expos of different kinds. I went with my wife, and she sort of made the same comment that just the vibe was so exciting. It was really fun. And if you're new to this channel, my take on things is maybe a little bit different from your generic filmmaking equipment channel. I'm not trying to be, the newspaper for you and give you every piece of incoming gear that's on the market. I come at it from a particular perspective, which is that I'm in the midst of making my first feature film as an independent filmmaker. I've written the script, I'm directing it, we've shot the first 10 pages as its own independent block, and as I go forward, this channel serves as a bit of a diary as I go through the process, as I discern what kind of equipment I want to use, as I discern how to go through my workflow and editing and all of it. And my focus at Cine Gear was primarily lenses. I'm really kind of obsessed with teasing out all the minute differences between lenses and sort of how that makes me feel as a viewer, in what cases those differences matter and in what cases they don't matter, trying to separate, reality from hype, from my own feelings on the matter. And all of those three things may be different in one way or another. But another piece of equipment that I really couldn't ignore, which was announced right before Cine Gear started, is the Canon C400 camera. I'm a Canon shooter. I'm being filmed on the R5C right now, and I also use a red V-Raptor X, which has an RF mount, so it's in, the distant Canon family, you might say. And yes, I know they've been acquired by Nikon and that things may change in the future, but right now there's an RF mount on my V-Raptor X. And I was really interested in what the C400 would be and what it would have to offer. And I'm also really interested in their new hybrid cinema lenses. So they announced alongside the C400 a brand new 35mm f1.4. It's called VCM for voice coil motor, but it's a hybrid lens. It has an iris ring that you can move. But like the focus rings on their newest lenses, that ring is not connected to anything mechanically. It connects to a sensor which electronically reads what you're doing and then moves the iris accordingly. But I wanted to take a look at these things and get an idea of what's going on. So I went to the Canon booth. I did a quick interview with one of their product managers. So let's take a look at that interview, and then we'll come back for a little more discussion afterwards. Hey everybody, Nick here with Matt Irving from Canon USA. Canon has just launched the new C400 cinema camera, as well as the 35mm f1.4 VCM. Matt, tell me a little bit about the philosophy of the camera, who it's for, and sort of what it means going forward in the EOS cinema line.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Very proud of our new C400 camera. This is pretty much a camera for every need. It can cover from your independent features to your live broadcast crowd, documentaries, reality TV shows. It really packs a lot into the camera. In fact, I would say that it would pack almost all of the features from the C500 and C300 line, plus all of the expansion unit features that those used to offer as well, all in a very compact camera body. So this is our 6K full frame camera with our back illuminated stacked CMOS sensor. So this is a sensor technology that's very fast readout speed. It's not global shutter, but it's very, very fast.
Okay.
And,
do you know by chance like the millisecond readout?
No, we don't know that number.
Okay.
But it is very fast. As I said, you are capable of getting 6K RAW at full frame. You could do 4.3K RAW at Super 35 as well. And then you can do our XF-AVC codecs that are 10-bit 422 that you've had through all of our legacy cameras as well.
And this has kind of the same, if people are familiar with like a C70 or an R5C, like what's filming us right now, it's going to have that same operating system, menus, layouts.
Very much so. Color science, all of that. It is RF mount native, which is very adaptable to every other mount that you want to get to. And we now also offer a PL to RF adapter, a Canon-made adapter as well, so you can get that on here.
Very cool.
But one of the new things this camera offers is a triple base ISO.
Right.
So now, if you're shooting Canon log 2 or 3, you can have base 800, 3200, and 12,800. And that's basically resetting your dynamic range around your middle gray at each of those new bases. So you get our full dynamic range, which in Canon log 2 is 16 stops.
Okay. Is that 16 stops like total? Do you know what the range is if we look at a signal to noise ratio of 1 or 2?
We're just, for right now, we're saying it's 16 stops total.
Got it.
And of course, that's going to change based on your signal to noise ratio if you get up into the higher ISOs.
Yeah. Do you know, I mean, you'd probably say generally it's higher dynamic range than like the C300 or the C70?
Well, the C300 Mark III has our DGO sensor.
That's right.
So that has probably the edge slightly on the dynamic range, but only by about half a stop. I mean, this is really playing up there with the high dynamic ranges. Very, very impressive. And what's great is it really gives the filmmakers now the choice to play around with how they want to prioritize signal to noise versus dynamic range. So for example, if you set the base ISO at 3200, but then pull back and shoot at 1600, it's going to be very, very clean.
Right.
But you're going to lop off a little bit of your dynamic range, but you can make these choices and see what's important to you in any given shooting environment.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Looks like it's really, really configurable. You've got a couple of different battery options on the back. The BPs by standard or V-mount with an adapter.
Right.
The really cool handle. I like how the handle's really easy to like add or detach without a whole lot of fuss with the camera.
Absolutely, yeah. The handle's very similar. The side handle is very similar to previous models, but the top handle is much more rugged. You've got 3 points of contact now that you can screw in, and the bridge to the LCD also is new. It's a new more configurable for the user.
I saw CVP do a little gimbal configuration where they took off these two handles and had the screen basically right on top. Do you know what that config was?
There's a screw point at the bottom of the LCD, and then you can screw that right into one of the top screws as well.
Okay, very
cool. So it can become very compact very quickly.
Yeah.
And yet it's still squeezing in a lot of things from our expansion units. Like I said, on the back here, you've not only got our 3G SDI and our 12G SDI, but you've got two little baby BNC DIN connectors here. One of which is offering Genlock return video and sync for a broadcast scenario. The other is your time code. You've also got Ethernet on the side, built-in Wi-Fi, and now you've even
full-size HDMI for everyone who's upset about small HDMI ports.
And you've got a 12-pin Hirose lens port right on the front as well.
Very cool. It looks like it's a lot packed into a small body.
Absolutely.
The $8,000 price tag is extremely competitive for the feature set. Tell me a little bit about the 35 VCM lens and how that fits into
what I understand is probably a category going forward, possibly with a 24 and a 50.
Well, I don't know about focal lengths, but it's definitely the first in a series of hybrid lenses. Just like the R5C is a hybrid video and stills camera that really kind of has a foot in both worlds. This lens has an independent iris ring that you can see here, and it also has that VCM motor that not only makes for very fast and quiet autofocus, but it helps compensate for focus breathing while you're rack focusing.
Got it.
And that's very similar to our 24 to 105 f2.8, which is also a hybrid in that it has that independent iris ring, very minimal focus breathing. So this is kind of this new series that we're coming out with that could be used with cinema as well as stills and be comfortable in both worlds.
My understanding was that the 24 to 105, the features described as electronically compensated focus breathing?
Yes, so that being a
like
zoom lens, so that's doing some of the compensation differently. It does not have our VCM, our voice coil motor.
But what is digitally compensated? Does that mean the camera is doing some processing to the image?
You know what, I actually don't know the answer to that.
All right. It's a mysterious marketing phrase that I don't understand.
But yeah, right out, if you're rack focusing on that, you're not going to find any focus breathing. It's really pretty astonishing.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, well I've always been really surprised by how little sort of fanfare the little RF lenses get, but I love them. I did a video recently like putting the little mini Cine lenses, as I call them, on like a V-Raptor, just to show like that these lenses actually are fantastic and can turn out a pretty high quality image. You know, they may breathe a ton more than you might want in a rack focus shot, or you know, they may not cover all the way out to VistaVision, but they do some really cool stuff. And you know, like some of the elements you have are these like precision molded, wavy, aspherical elements that help do a lot of correction in a very small space.
Yeah.
And I think that's really cool. I think people are kind of missing out on, you know, opportunities for extremely lightweight setups.
Yeah. There's a lot of different looks for a lot of different needs, and you can kind of play around with the optics and kind of find the use for them. It's really pretty exciting to have the whole range of optics available to you.
So I'm excited to see what the VCM line looks like going forward. I think the camera is going to be really exciting for a lot of people. It's kind of a step into a much larger sort of camera space at a much smaller price.
Absolutely, and even little features that we didn't talk about, like auto clear scan. If you're working with LED walls, if you're working with a fluorescent environment, you can just kind of point the camera at something that's flickering and it will detect the cadence and sync the camera up with the cadence. So it's just packed with features and in a nice small package for a run and gun shooter up to a studio shooter, and very exciting to see what all you creative people come up with.
Thank you. When will each of these be shipping?
Fall.
Okay.
So in the fall.
We don't have a date yet, just
not a set date. Just look for it in the fall. Yes.
Cool. Well, Matt, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And everybody out there who's interested, I think you know where you can find Canon products.
Absolutely. Thanks for stopping by Canon.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, man.
Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Okay, so what are my thoughts on the C400 right now as it stands? I haven't gotten to shoot with one. I haven't gotten to shoot with that 35mm lens either. But I think ultimately the feeling I come away with is that it's something you can't ignore. So Canon is making a pretty bold statement with the C400 in terms of producing a very fully featured cinema camera in a small form factor that is accessible in terms of its price. I would say it's a pretty direct competitor to the Sony Burano, which is a camera 3 times the price. Now you might say, well, hey, the Burano has IS and image stabilization, and it has, you know, XYZ other features, and that's true. But the C400 is pretty darn feature packed. It has a pretty good sensor. Canon was adamant that it was a really fast shutter. It's not a global shutter, but they're saying it's real fast. And the R5C that's shooting me right now is like a 15 millisecond shutter, and the Burano is like a 22 millisecond shutter or something like that. And so I imagine it's going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 12 milliseconds. That's just my ballpark guess without having any more information. But if that's true, that's pretty darn good. They're also saying it's not going to be quite as much dynamic range as their dual gain output sensors like the C300 Mark II and the C70, but that it's going to be good, that it's got good dynamic range overall. And yes, it has 3 native ISOs, but that's sort of less interesting to me than just the overall dynamic range. I tend to shoot in RAW, and so selecting which base ISO we're at beforehand is not super important. Yes, afterwards you can choose how you're going to map the dynamic range, but ultimately you've recorded what you've recorded, and if you do so in RAW, all the information is there, and you're maximizing what the sensor can do. But what is interesting to me about the camera is the form factor, the size and weight, the feature set, you know, the fact that you've got buttons everywhere, mounting points everywhere, internal ND, which is really helpful, the native RF mount. I'm glad it's not an EF mount. I think they're pretty much moving away from that completely. But it looks like a pretty rock solid camera. I don't intend to go out and buy one immediately. I have everything I need in the V-Raptor X, which is a fully featured cinema camera and pretty relatively small, and the R5C, which is a hybrid mirrorless, but much lighter and can be stripped down to almost nothing. And so that combination works really well for me. But for people looking at a camera, looking at upgrading, going from, you know, mirrorless cameras to something more dedicated, this is something that will be hard to ignore. Like I say, I think the LCD is pretty great. I think the fact that you can strip it down to put it just right on top of the body, like CVP did in their intro video, is going to be awesome. I foresee a lot of people running it that way. Basically just the box and the LCD on a gimbal, and then running power with a cable and running whatever lens you're going to run. But you're able to have a pretty small rig that way. I do that with my V-Raptor, just the box and a lens, and then I put the monitor elsewhere. But the C400 is a fair bit lighter than the V-Raptor X. I think by like 500 grams or so like a pound. And every pound matters, of course, when you're on a gimbal. But I think the C400 is really interesting. I'm really interested in the 35mm f1.4 VCM. I've been kind of on a quest for good, fast lenses that can kind of be my go-to going forward. I don't know that the 35 VCM will be it. I think I'm in search of, you know, a fully mechanical, cine, metal, beastly solution for that. And I've had my eye on the DZO Arliss lenses for some time, but I think it's going to be a pretty compelling product, the 35 VCM, and I'm excited to see more about it. So those are my initial thoughts. That's the initial interview. I hope you guys enjoy it. I have a bunch more coverage from Cine Gear coming up, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.